And it's good that I read that because I hadn't started recording yet. So, let's see. We do want to say thank you to our sponsors, NITSCO, Mary Lee Environmental Center of Goshen College, and NAAE for sponsoring the conference, as well as some private sponsors too. And David Sobel, we got to listen to him last night, and you're back for more today because you're excited about this. And Brian is back with us again, Brian Forrest, since that's come up already this morning. And I don't know how much introduction David needs. It seems like people know exactly who he is. I have always been impressed with his work in just that connection of children with nature before we were asking them to save nature. And he talked to us last night about that ladder of environmental responsibility type of thing. And he has a new book out that we can see that on the screen right now. And his work with nature preschools and books that he's put out before was very influential in me in having kind of the nuts and bolts of the administrative end. How do we make this happen, and what do we need to have in place to make it work, and things of that sort. He's an emeritus professor at Untitled University, and everyone that I know that has been there, I know Megan Gessler, I'm sure you know her, from different conferences and things in Illinois. She works with Northern Illinois Nature Preschool Association, NINPA. They do some great conferences and things, so not too far if you're in Northern Indiana. Quality people are coming out of that program and doing great things all over the place. So it's neat to see what's happening with them. And we're going to turn it over to David Sobel. You're welcome to use the chat to post questions or comments or any of those kinds of things as well. And if we do have some questions as we go along, it sounds like from David's end that there is some time, some wiggle room, and if we would like to discuss some things along the way too. And we'll have question and answers at the end as well. So thank you. Lead it away, David.
Thanks, Carla. This is a great opportunity. This is the first time I'm doing this presentation, so it was a good opportunity to kind of think about the book and think about how to share it. I want to be clear that it has my name on the cover, but there are, it includes articles by 18 different contributors from people around the country, and I'm going to share a lot of those with you, one of whom is Megan, and one of my favorite pieces in the book is actually by Megan. So it's really a collaborative effort that I pulled together. I want to say a little bit about the title, because most people are probably not aware of where the title came from. The title, "The Sky Above and the Mud Below." Why is it not proceeding here? There we go. The title comes from a French and Dutch documentary made in about 1961 or 2. And it was an anthropological expedition to the highlands of New Guinea to explore all those little isolated tribes in New Guinea. And the movie's great, and it's the white anthropologist's fascination with the structure and the nature of the cultures in New Guinea. And, you know, they were kind of surprised by what they were finding, and the New Guinean people were surprised that these white folks were showing up. And so the frame that I use for the book is that the anthropologists going into the highlands of New Guinea is kind of like when the people from the Children and Family Services Licensing Bureau come to nature preschools and forest kindergartens and see kids tromping in the mud and doing risky behaviors. And so in some cases, it's a cultural clash. That's becoming less true because of the work that's happening in Washington State and other places. But it's this difference of cultural views of what should early childhood look like. I also want you to know, I'm going to go backwards for a second. Can I go backwards? Oh, it's not working. Well, the cover for the book that turned out was not the original cover. What's happening here? There we go. There was the originally proposed cover. And there was something about that little girl that just really upset me. It was, I kind of liked its muddiness, but somehow the kind of, it's hard to tell whether she's angry or vehement or happy or whatever. So if you're working on a book and the publishers propose a book cover, don't necessarily go with their first choice. So I'm going to do a little background on kind of the frame for the rationale for nature preschools and forest kindergartens, and then I'm going to get into some of the great ideas that I collected as part of the book. So this notion that denying children of a chance to encounter nature, no matter how small, robs them of the very essence of life, and yet concern over crime and children's safety in public space is linked with a decreasing amount of time spent by children in the outdoors. If that wasn't true a few years ago, it is certainly more true now. Children are basically locked up indoors in a lot of situations. And that's a great sadness. And so what we have to do is figure out ways to counteract the digitalization of kids' lives during the pandemic and afterwards. So this is from a great parenting magazine article from about probably a decade ago. And this is a mom talking about her own children. I want to stand in the front yard and sing out their lovely names at dusk and have them suddenly appear in the damp yard around me like fireflies, but I can't let them roam. I don't have my mother's confidence that the world is a safe place. Certainly doesn't feel like a safe place right now. So she's basically concerned about the golden age of childhood being gone. And I'm contending that it's not gone, but it's going, and it's our responsibility as environmental educators or classroom teachers or preschool teachers to figure out how to preserve what we can of the golden age of childhood. So the reasons for outdoor diminishing play, I haven't redone this slide. Obviously, the first one should be the pandemic, though outdoor play has been a nice emergent counterpoint. Screen time and structured activities and working parents and school and homework, fear of injuries, though more children are injured falling out of bed than falling out of trees. There's interesting to see how much the opposition there is to tree climbing. And then this kind of odd notion of stranger danger, though children are 1,600 times more likely to be injured in a car accident than abducted by a stranger, but we're not concerned about putting children in cars every day. So what we have to do is counter this cultural trend towards childhood isolation. And then this is the other kind of thing that's been happening. This is a decade old at this point, but it's a good thing to be cognizant of. The British Columbian Environmental Group concerned that the Oxford Junior Dictionary was getting rid of words like beaver and dandelion and heron and magpie and willow, and in their place they had substituted more modern terms. These are not even modern terms anymore, but like BlackBerry and blog and MP3 player. And so when the lexicon changes, that's a sure indicator that the cultural experience is changing. So it's our responsibility to get heron and magpie and otter and acorn back into children's lexicons and their experiences. So this is the prior book. And I think this girl's expression really gets at what we're after here, is the kind of the joyfulness of being in nature that a lot of kids experience. This book was more of a kind of theoretical frame overview for why nature preschools and forest kindergartens are important and how to start one, and some of the business issues. So the current book, The Sky Above and the Mud Below, is much more the actual details of policy and how you organize the school, and then what some great examples of curriculum are. So in case, this is kind of old news for everybody, just the key features of nature preschools. The use of the natural world as the setting, regular and frequent contact in the same place. Having you go to the same place or same places regularly and often. And then the goals are similar to traditional preschool education, with the addition of the fact that what you're really trying to do is lay this foundation for stewardship behavior. So I'm going to give you a little bit of I want to present a little model for thinking about curriculum, because lots of the examples I'm going to show you later fall within this model that I'm proposing. This, by the way, is a picture from Chippewa Nature Preschool in Midland, Michigan. This is the program that Rachel Larimore, who's doing all the presentations today, this is the place that she started. So this is the theoretical framework. This comes from a great piece called The Crisis in the Kindergarten, Why Children Need to Play in School. Not specifically about nature preschools and forest kindergartens, but about play-based preschool education. And their contention is that on one end of the curriculum continuum, you've got didactic, highly structured classrooms. It's got teacher-led instruction, lots of scripted teaching. On the other end of the continuum, you've got the laissez-faire, loosely structured classroom with ample play, but not enough active adult support, often resulting in chaos. And they contend that what you want is somewhere in the middle here, either the classroom rich in child-initiated play or the playful classroom with focused learning. One slightly more child-centered, one slightly more teacher-centered, but both of them with a balance between the two. These two authors, Ed Miller and Joan Allman, say that you do a disservice to children if you're at either end of this continuum, and you most best serve children's needs if you're in this middle part. So I want to illustrate from examples, not from the current book, and then from the current book. So here's a great example from a school in Richmond, Virginia. This is an independent school, basically regio-oriented. They have a piece of parkland, of city parkland, adjacent to the school, and they started using the forest as the piazza. And so kids, kindergarten, first and second graders would go to this, down into the forest, and there was this fallen down tree, and it became the focus for a lot of activity. And there were two different activities going on at either end of the tree. On the right-hand side of the picture, a couple of boys, there was this deconstruction activity going on, and the boys were trying to loosen the trunk from its main support. So they were trying to get the bole, the trunk of the tree, to fall off of the stump. At the other end of the tree, you can see it's more girls and a couple of boys. They were doing what I refer to as fabrication. There was a chocolate factory going on. They were making stuff with chocolate, chocolate being that pine duff that's turned into kind of a sawdusty kind of mulch. And there was also a history museum. They were finding pieces of the tree that looked like artifacts and creating a little museum. And then the kids from the fabrication end of the activity liked sitting or walking on the incline of the trunk. So they coexisted for a little while. And then there started to be this a little bit of a debate between the kids at one end of the log and the other end of the log. So Stella, who was a fabrication child, said, people come down here just for this tree. It's a special tree. People like climbing on this tree. So she didn't want the boys to loose the trunk from the stump, because then it wouldn't be as much fun to climb on. And Luke, who is a deconstruction advocate, said, well, you can always climb on other things and make another climbing tree. And they agreed that the deconstruction kids agreed that if somebody was on the tree, then they wouldn't do deconstruction. So then Reese, who was a fabrication kid, decided that he was going to do a nonviolent sit-in. In other words, if he just sat on the tree, the deconstruction kids couldn't deconstruct. And the teachers wisely took the debate back into the classroom. So after the kids would go back inside, the teachers had a debate. And so, advocating for deconstruction, Oliver said, persistence is good, like in the Iliad. This is, of course, what we want from young children, is to quote classical literature. Drew said, it'll be fun to watch when it falls. It'll make a big cloud of dirt. And then against deconstruction, Nora was saying, leave nature alone. It's part of the forest. It'll squish us when it falls. Annie was saying it'll be a problem for kids that can't climb on it. So put this in the context of the Common Core key points in writing. One of the Common Core key points is the ability to write logical arguments based on substantive claims, sound reasoning, and relevant evidence is the cornerstone of the writing standards. So my contention is what the teachers did here was that they took the play experience and turned it into the precursors for this kind of what we want kids to start to think about in terms of writing. Is they're using substantive claims, sound reasoning, relevant evidence to make arguments for their perspective. So they're learning to take a stand. They're using literature and history, like in the Iliad. They're recruiting others to support their positions, right? And recognizing that nonviolent action can be a method for making a point. So, I thought I was going to go back to to that continuum. So what started out here as a child-centered play activity without much form to it got drawn by the teachers into that center of that continuum, where the teachers were taking what was unstructured play and turning it into a learning experience on learning how to construct argumentation. Here's another great example of, I'm going to keep making a point about convergent evolution. I'll explain that in a little bit. But also an example of taking something that starts as play and making it more of an academic learning experience. This is from the Juniper Hill School for Place-Based Education in Alna, Maine. And interestingly, this is the convergent evolution part of it. The kids had started the Chocolate River Bakery. The chocolate was essentially the same material that the kids in Virginia were referring to. So it was the pine duff that, or the pine wood that kind of gets really composted and turns into mulchy stuff. That became the chocolate. And with that material, the kids had created a bakery, and they actually had a fallen log and shelves, and they were creating different kinds of baked goods with all the diverse raw materials that were there. So they were making vanilla cupcakes and chocolate cakes and chocolate pudding. And this child had made a nut bread. And so his, he had taken a half cup of wood chips and 2 cups of mud and 4 tablespoons of sawdust. And then, so this was a recipe that the teachers had the kids create to describe the things that they were making. So that was one step from play to, okay, what's the actual recipe for your concoction? But then the teachers went a step further, and the head teacher collaborated with a tea room. The tea room is called Wabi Sabi, down the street from where the school is. And the baker at the tea room took the kids' recipes and translated them into actual comparable recipes. And so the nut bread recipe became a genuine recipe that the child who had created the nut bread recipe actually had to, all the kids went down to the bakery, the kids concocted the real recipes, and then the children had a tea party for the parents of all the stuff that they had baked. So again, what started in mud play, in the mud kitchen, essentially, got translated into reading and executing recipes to create a family experience. So same example, free play turned into a learning experience. Okay, so that's the framework for some of the stuff that we're going to look at. So essentially, I'm going to share with you some of the what I think of as the greatest hits from that I collected in this Sky Above and Mud Below book. And after a few of these, I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions. So the first part of the book is all policy and procedures, and the second half of the book is more curriculum. So early on, there's all the rules, how to prepare for going outside. And there's also a couple of articles on developing infrastructure. And so if you're going to take children from public school classrooms out into the woods, the out in the woods place needs infrastructure. And so this is a particularly nice example of infrastructure from the Heartland Elementary School in Heartland, Vermont, where they've got good benches for sitting in, and the stumps serve as both sitting and desks, and then great sitting around the campfire, really kind of well-defined campfire that has within the parameters for all the fire guidelines from the local town fire department. Of course, one of the biggest issues in any kind of nature preschool or moving school outdoors is the winter clothing guide. This is a particularly nice little concise winter clothing guide from the Forest Gnomes Wald Kindergarten in Natick, Massachusetts. This is on the grounds of a community farm, and not a very big space, about 5 acres, but a really interesting, comprehensive program. And so, if you're going to do any of this stuff, you really have to become serious about, okay, how are we going to articulate what clothing needs these kids have, and when parents can't afford to provide this kind of clothing for kids, how are we going to make it available for the children? So you have to kind of start to initiate a clothing bank for kids and clothing exchanges. My wife was just supervising a kindergarten teacher who's doing spending half the day outside with her kids currently during the pandemic. The teacher, this is a new thing for this teacher, and she said, I don't know, what I've been doing is just going outside and then the kids play. And she said, is that right? And I said, my wife should have told her, no, that's not right. What you really need is a predictable schedule for what you do when you go out to the forest classroom, and it needs to be the same each time, and the kids need to understand that it has a clear pattern to it. So this is the Woods Day schedule from the Teton Valley Community School in Victor, Idaho. One would presume that if you're in Idaho, you just walk out the door. That's not true in this situation. For these kids to go to their forest classroom, they have to actually take the school bus to a national forest park place that's a few miles away. So the kids get woods ready, they have the morning meeting, they get on the bus, they go out to the forest, and then they have a clear pattern while they're out there. In this case, there's not a lot of kind of directed learning experiences. In a lot of the nature, kindergarten, first grade, early grades experience, there's always a balance between academic experience, teacher-led academic activities, math with acorns, and also free play. So there's that kind of balance between child-initiated activity and teacher-led activity in the schedule. And you need a different set of rules for outside. I've seen lots of different sets of rules. This is a particularly nice set. This is also from the Teton Valley Community School in Idaho. The 3 woods rules: see and hear a teacher at all times, keep your hands to yourself, and if a stick is bigger than you, you need a friend to help, as illustrated in that upper picture. I've never seen that as one of the 3 core rules. That's why I like it. The kids, there are obviously other subsidiary rules, and there's a big animal drill at this school. Because when the kids are out in the national forest, it's possible that they're going to encounter bears or moose or elk. So there's a lot of other big animals. And so one of the nice things that teachers do is, back in the classroom, they have the children illustrate what each one of the rules looks like. So in this case, they were having the children illustrate what the animal drill looks like. And I want you to look at that picture and figure out what that big animal is that they're having to be concerned about. What happens when you do the big animal drills? You have to freeze and you have to get to a teacher as quickly as possible. And if you're, let me see where's the chat room? I don't have a chat. If you haven't figured it out, that big animal that the children are doing the drill for is a unicorn. And I love the fact that there are still places in the United States where you can encounter unicorns out in the forest. So as part of the policies and procedures of moving school into the outdoor world, rest time has always been indoors. Why not do rest time outdoors? So at least when it's reasonably pleasant. At the All Together Now preschool in Montpelier, Vermont, the kids do outdoor rest time. And this woman, Katie, said it was hard in the beginning to get kids to do this. Some kids warmed to it right away. Some kids just didn't like it, but eventually they all really enjoyed it. And I'm sure you're familiar with some of the accounts of being in Scandinavia and seeing kids outdoors, infants outdoors in prams when it's 10 degrees or really chilly, while their parents are inside in a coffee shop. So outdoor napping or outdoor resting has been part of the culture in Europe much more than it has been here. And then the other thing you have to do as part of this policies and procedures is you've got to be engaging your parents in what you're trying to accomplish, because this whole having kids outdoors a lot is not what most parents experience or expect from preschool experiences. So this is a collaborative program. The child care program is the Storyteller Children's Center, which is essentially a program for foster children or children at risk in Santa Barbara. And the Wilderness Youth Project is a local nonprofit environmental organization. And so the two work together to do a family camping weekend. And so these are images from that family camping weekend. So the idea is to get kids and parents and educators all together doing camping in the hills and the forest around Santa Barbara. A lot of these parents and grandparents, haven't been camping in and around Santa Barbara. So here's a letter from one of the parents or grandparents after the campout. She said, "Thank you for the invitation to the campout. It was an unforgettable experience that I enjoyed with my loving family members, my mother, my daughters, and my grandson. Recognize that if it's my mother, my daughters, and my grandson, that means there's 4 generations of family members. My childhood memories and feelings came back to my mind with this experience. I could enjoy nature, the river, the stars, the moon. Thank you to each person who made it possible." Last line, "I wish from the bottom of my heart that this camp out does not become the only one that I could attend. God bless you." So if we're going to change children's experience in the natural world, what we really need to be doing is getting parents to want to be in the natural world more, so that when kids are not in school or in preschool and they're with parents, parents are engaging children with the natural world. So we have to change family culture as much as changing the school culture. I'm going to pause there for a second because I'm going to start to move into curriculum examples. Carla, are there any salient questions that have emerged?
Okay, sorry. So one person wondered about like outdoor rest time, about how long are people allowing for that? And maybe just some curiosity around that. We've had a lot of kind of good conversations around unicorns and sticks and all of those kinds of things. That was funny. But do you have any idea about taking rest time outside and how long people may be allowing for that? I see usually half an hour to an hour in more traditional preschools, and sometimes even more, up to 2 hours for some, usually allowing the child who doesn't choose to have the sleep or need the sleep to have some quiet playtime kind of thing at their spot or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's the same kind of thing at that program. I think it's half an hour to an hour. Okay. With lots of flexibility about if some children actually fall asleep, they don't get roused up. Yeah. But it gives you so much more, and I think some of the children don't. Some of the children that might sleep inside don't necessarily sleep outside because there's so much more to be engaged with. Watching the clouds and looking at the grass and looking at the grasshoppers that hop onto you. But it's a different way of creating that kind of quiet engagement with the natural world to do it outdoors.
It almost seems like it kind of becomes that sit spot that we talk about sometimes as part of that too. So yeah, you've got your own little spot that you observe the world from regularly. Right. Yeah.
Should I keep going?
Sure. Unless if anybody has a question or anything like that, they're welcome to pull them on up. So I love the information about the deconstructing and destructive kind of play. And I think that that's so needed for so many of children. And I've done a podcast episode and I'm like, I need to destroy things sometimes. Like that demolition thing would be just how empowering that is to demo something. And as an adult, I feel that rush kind of when I do it as well. And we just need to channel it into appropriate things to deconstruct. And I love seeing that negotiation between the children in trying to solve their problem that they had between the competing groups. And you framed really well what they were learning and developing in skills through that. So thank you.
Right. And I was in that example, I was really sympathetic to the deconstruction kids. I kind of wanted, if it was me, I would want to see it dislodged from the stump. So I thought they both had valid engagements. Okay, so now some examples of great curriculum things that just kind of emerged around the country. And part of my screen for which things I chose here were just things that showed convergent evolution. And by convergent evolution, I mean the same kinds of interesting unexpected activities emerging in different places with no relationship to each other. And the fact that they're evolving in different places means that they're coming out of some basic instinctual interest on the part of kids and their relationship with the natural world. So the chocolate example I've seen in a number of different places. So the use of real tools and kids' fascination with real tools is one of these things that keeps coming up in lots of places. So this is that same Storyteller Children's Center. Essentially serves mostly Latinx children. And I love it that the teachers really understand the virtue of putting tools into the hands of young children. Same kind of thing at the Chicago Botanic Garden. This is where Sarah Sheldon runs the program. The child on the left here is using scissors to trim onions or leeks or scallions or something like that. And the kids on the right have these little spray bottles, a really appropriate tool for the current pandemic situation. But, you know, giving kids this sense of accomplishing real tasks and providing them with the tools to accomplish real tasks. And then Sarah also wrote an article for the book that's about brooms. And she starts the article off by saying, brooms, who would have thunk, right? And that, so they provide, she found that providing all different kinds of brooms, you know, hand brooms and large floor brooms engender all different kinds of activities that she had never quite anticipated. Sarah did this great thing. I'm going to do a couple of things about language development right now. Sarah does this great thing kind of based on Vivian Paley's work in preschool education on dictation. And, you know, so that the kids will have experiences. And since they're preschool, you know, these are 3 or 4 year old kids, you don't expect them to be writing, but you get them to dictate stories that the teacher then writes down. And then in some cases, she has another article about story play, Vivian Paley's activity where children dictate stories and at one point during the day, and then there's another story theater time when children enact the stories. Teachers read the stories and children enact them. This one is a particularly nice activity where the kids found this dead rabbit. If you look at that picture closely, you'll see that it's a headless rabbit. And then there's a lot of dictation of stories about what happened to the rabbit. And so here's Violet's story. Once upon a time, there was a bunny when it was alive, then it broke its head off from a fox, and then it was bleeding. A big predator ate it. Then the family came to see the dead bunny. They took the bunny to the hospital. The doctor came and fixed it. Then it was all better, but it was still hurting. So the doctor gave it a big Band-Aid and made it feel better. Then the bunny was better. The bunny went home and took a nap. This is similar to the unicorn. It's nice to know that you can lose your head, but then get it fixed relatively easily. One of the interesting things that's coming out of the documentation of these programs is the impact on vocabulary development. In the research we did at Chippewa Nature Center, there's a lot of description of the diversity of scientific terminology that 4, 5, and 6-year-old kids were coming up with or learning and internalizing. And so you get predator here is not necessarily a normal word for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. In the same vein of language development, this notion that nature-based, play-based learning experiences are great for children who are second language learners. So children whose primary language is not English, and they're in a program in which they're learning English as the result of all the interaction with the stuff and the animals and the plants. So this is from Michigan State's Tollgate Farm and Education Center. And this little Korean child in the yellow slicker started coming to the program with very little English facility. And because there's so many opportunities for language to be connected with real things, it becomes a vehicle for facilitating easier fashion language learning on the part of children. So here's her mother wrote at the end of the program. Actually, this child was in this program for a couple of years. The most notable change is that she uses English a lot more. Oftentimes she surprises me by saying whole sentences. We saw she speaks, says hello, giggles with friends in English. She started to ask for something she wants in English. In our perspective, it eased our concern for the language barrier. Lots of different anecdotal accounts of children that don't talk inside, who talk outside. And so this notion that nature-based learning is really the original context for language learning. I'm going to not go into a whole language development thing right now. The other thing is that you got to love, sometimes the photographs that emerge are fantastic. You got to love the pinks in this picture, right? The sunglasses, the boots, and the mittens. I don't think anybody planned it that way, but boy, is that a great color scheme. This was primarily a math activity, but that's not what was most charming about it. Again, we're back in Santa Barbara. And what happened here was that the teachers knew that there was this, or there was actually this period of rain after about 4 or 5 years of hardly any rain at all. And with the children, they watched Singing in the Rain, that Gene Kelly movie, or excerpts from the Gene Kelly movie, especially that scene when he's singing in the rain and singing and dancing in the rain. And then they took children outside with the set of activities that they observed in the movie and did the same kind of things that Gene Kelly did in the rain. So Gene Kelly, he stops under the downspout with the water pouring onto the umbrella. So the kids did that kind of thing, and they stomped through puddles. And so I loved the idea of initiating activities based on the Gene Kelly movie. This is Megan's activity that might be my favorite example of emergent curriculum in the last decade. So Megan, let me just check the time. Okay. Megan at this time was running the Natural Beginnings program at the Kendall County Forest Preserve. She now works at the Morton Arboretum. But so long walks in the forest preserve, and on one of these walks, unintentionally, they came upon a box that was a geocache. So that's the box in the tree. And they opened up the box, and inside they found pirate treasure, or what the children presumed was pirate treasure. And so the kids decided, wow, this is great. There's pirate treasure. There must be more pirate treasure. There must be more pirate treasure on the other side of the stream. So there was a stream nearby. The kids are talking about, there must be more pirate treasure over there. And at this point, Megan did this brilliant thing. Instead of saying, well, we can't go over there because the stream is too deep, Megan said, how could we get across the stream? And so that started this fantastic problem solving activity where, so she said, I wondered aloud how we could do that. In other words, the kids had said, oh, let's make a boat. And Megan says, I wondered aloud how we could do that. And the children said, sticks, Miss Megan. We could put sticks in the water and float across just like a pirate ship. So they actually tried putting down sticks, and that didn't work. And so the next day, back in the center, Megan said, so how are we going to make a boat? And she provided these strips of sheet and glue. The kids had a wide range of ideas. But what wound up happening was they wound up, and this was the kids' idea, weaving together sticks to make a boat. Then they had to take the boat and get it back to the stream that they wanted to cross, which was about 3/4 of a mile across an off-trail log-ridden steep terrain. So this also became a problem-solving activity of figuring out how to get the boat to balance on the little conveyance that they had there. And kids were running ahead to remove sticks and logs from the path that they were following. Kids, the thing didn't balance quite right, so some kids had to be in the back to hold it up so it wouldn't fall off. So again, a great engineering in the moment kind of experience. They made it to the stream, and it turns out, this is not exactly where they crossed, but it turns out that what they thought was going to be a raft or a bridge turned into a raft, or a boat turned into a bridge. And they were able to span the stream at a place that was narrow enough and shallow enough so they could get across to the other side. And Megan said the students beamed with delight at their own triumph. As soon as the kids got across, Megan realized that, oh no, what are we going to do? The kids think there's going to be more pirates' treasure over here. I'm pretty sure there's not going to be any other of these geocaches. The kids are going to be really disappointed. Instead, what happened was there had been this one section of stream where the water level had been higher. The water had frozen, the stream had receded, the ice had broken into all these little triangular shards. And the children saw the shards of ice and they gasped at the sight of the treasure. Those magical ice chunks glittered and sparkled in the sunlight, just like diamonds. Ahoy, pirates, we have found our jewels. There be pirate treasure in Illinois after all. So the kids were perfectly excited about finding the shards of ice, and that fulfilled their desire for pirate treasure. So this whole thing that happened over the course of about a week, could easily have never happened. And it happened because Megan realized that the idea of, gee, how can we get across the stream to find more pirate treasure was a perfectly legitimate and potentially solvable problem. And she went with it and provided kids with the opportunity. She didn't say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. She said, how are we going to figure this out? Perfect example of emergent curriculum, and perfect example of taking something and turning it into a STEM challenge that's appropriate for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. Here's another example of convergent curriculum. This whole idea of tennis ball runs on hillsides. This one's from that Heartland, Vermont public school that I showed you before, where the idea is to have tennis balls, roll them down the hill and make them behave in certain ways, go around a certain corners, go over jumps, and wind up in a location. A great STEM engineering task. I saw this in Heartland, Vermont. I also saw it in a couple of different forms in Prior Lake, Minnesota, south of the Twin Cities. In that picture on the left, instead of a tennis ball, it's a wiffle ball that the kids have found. And the kids are trying to make that wiffle ball, identified by that white arrow, go through that place, the arch in the fallen down log that's on the ground. At another school in this same district, they're doing a similar kind of activity with pieces of gutter and wheels, wooden wheels. So they put the gutter pieces together and roll these wooden wheels down the hill. Great problem-solving activities. How do we make the ball stay on the track? How do we make sure it doesn't hop over the fence? So this these are inherently interesting things that kids want to do, and they will engender them either on their own accord or be perfectly willing to do them if are very engaged in doing them if teachers suggest them and provide the right materials. Couple more examples. Lots of people say, oh, well, we can't do that. We're downtown. This is a nice example from the preschool environmental education program at the Urban Ecology Center in Milwaukee with Matt Flower. And Matt goes into different Head Start programs around the city and works with kids in the outdoors right around their centers. And a lot of times it's just it's just asphalt or little strips of lawn with trees in them. And his goal is to use whatever is available and teach the teachers to be able to use whatever is available and not be discouraged by the fact that, well, we don't have a meadow or we don't have woods to go into. You've got something that's out there, and the important thing is to have kids outdoors and be physically active. And so there's a couple of examples of running your hand, running along the fence and running your hand along the fence to feel the texture of the fence, and then doing guided movement activities with leaves in that lower right hand picture. So it's as important to get kids being physically active as it is to use natural materials to learn academic things. And then the last piece here on urban gardening. This is from this is a nice example from the St. George's Episcopal Preschool in New Orleans. And Claire Lofgren, they had a nice little schoolyard garden which was not being used, and Claire decided to really turn lots of her activities into using the garden at all different seasons of the year. So this is a nice fall activity of having daffodil and other kinds of bulbs, and children exploring them inside the classroom and drawing what they saw of the bulbs, and then doing planting of the bulbs in the fall, and then studying them when they come up in the spring. And in the book, there's 2 or 3 different nice examples of different kinds of gardening experiences. Claire decided she was frustrated with this preschool because even though they had this nice garden beds, she wanted something that was more purely outdoor and exploratory. And so she started the New Orleans Nature School. New Orleans Nature School. And so ending with her images from her school of the sky above here, children up in this tree, climbing along that limb, and in the mud below. I can't quite figure out what's happening in that picture, even though maybe that child is planting something, but it looks really muddy. So the big idea is all children deserve nature-based education, whether they're in rural Vermont or urban New Orleans or urban Milwaukee or rural Chicagoland. We've got to figure out ways to make this possible for all the kids. Thanks. So I'm done, Carla.
Thank you so much, David. These pictures just are so inspiring to me, and I love seeing children in the outdoors and doing what they do naturally. And you've also shared many examples of just that educator connection piece of how to use that emergent curriculum. And with that continuum that you shared with play, I've seen that many times in some of your prior work as well. And just neat to Need to see that the examples of how educators are moving from the play to kind of solidify that STEM learning, and some would say that play is enough, and it's also neat to see these examples of how we can support that play in developmentally appropriate ways. So if people do have questions, you're welcome to ask them now. We were hearing some thank yous and different things. We've been chatting around sticks and different things like that, and shared some different resources around ramps and math outdoors and ice and all those kinds of wonderful things. And yeah, someone, Annie, let me see if I can see her last name again. Annie Thoraldson, she said that one of the last schools that you did was her school. And so she said she misses those kiddos. And so neat to have her here.
Annie was the teacher of that, at that school where the kids were doing the ball rolling in Prior Lake, right? I think so.
I think so. So I asked her to share more about it, but we haven't heard back from her in the chat. But kind of neat to see the connections and people that are there. And I have absolutely loved that kind of ramp play kind of thing, and just seeing how children, I remember we had a stump that had all these like holes and burrows inside of the stump. And so that became its own kind of ball run or marble run in and of itself. It was just a stump with all these little holes and ways to get through it. But so many ways to do things with that. So, and just to see how children take it, and it really becomes, I've noticed that type of play continues through 10, 11 years old when given the space and such for it. Ellie McConchie asked about having a copy of the slides. I'm not sure if that's something that we can share in the resources within the conference or not. But I do know that we will have a copy of the recording, Ellie, up probably by tomorrow morning, so that people can go back and see it as well. So not sure what you thought about that.
Yeah, I'm never really enthusiastic about sharing these PowerPoints, but almost all of those images and the things that I've talked about are in that book, or in the Sky Above and the Mud Below book.
Yes, and he said it is a massive book, not too massive to get, but that it's just chock full of resources and information, and those picture examples and inspiration with that as well. So yeah.
I wanted to make a point in response to your earlier comment, Carla, about nature play by itself versus nature play and you extract the academic opportunities from it. In a lot of the European programs, it's mostly nature play. My sense in the United States is that that what's politically most savvy, even though it might not be what's absolutely best for kids, but what's politically most savvy is this balance between nature play and integrated academics. Is that the pure nature play without too much structure around it is just too foreign for lots of American educators and parents. And so I think what we're looking at is an American version that both is pretty good for kids and necessary and appropriately academic, so parents and educators can accept it.
Yeah. And I think I would agree with that as well. I just came from a play conference before this one, and around many pure play enthusiasts, and my background's education. And so I kind of have that hybrid American version that you mentioned, and realized that we need to educate on the benefits of play, and then also to be able to translate this into some of the standards and such that are required in K through 12 classrooms, especially, need to show that we're meeting some of those standards with that as well. So it's a delicate balance, and like you mentioned, that nature play is really important. But
can I end with one story?
Mhm.
This illustrates the difference between the European pure play mindset and the more American mindset. There's a great movie made by Play Wales about to train play workers, and there's a scene in it in which the kids are playing around a fire at dusk, and lots of kids are throwing paper into the fire, and it's going up. It's kind of floating up, and you're wondering where the burning sparks, embers are going, and kids are sticking sticks into the fire and then winging them around, and at some point some kid gets burned by a burning end of a stick, and the whole fire scene made me feel really uncomfortable. And afterwards I said to the guy who made the movie, I said, "Great movie, the fire scene made me uncomfortable." He said, "The fire scene is in the movies because if play workers are uncomfortable with the fire scene, we know they're not going to be good play workers." In other words,
Go ahead.
fire play is good, and we don't put any limits on it.
And I've done a whole episode, podcast episode on playing with fire. And I had a lot of people that were uncomfortable with even the title, like, we can't play. And I just see it as another loose part or variable kind of thing. And that's a good point on play workers. Play work is a completely separate discipline. And that's the conference, kind of type of conference that I was in was more play work based than education and nature play kind of thing. But I really have learned so much from play workers. And I think that the connections we can make between disciplines, even though they seem like they may be somewhat different, can be powerful and helpful. I've learned so much from like Mark Armitage from the play work community, and some of the people from like Pop-Up Adventure Play and other organizations like that, and Kelsey Lingley. She's the one that just hosted this other play conference, but there's a lot we can learn. And Ellie McConaughey, sorry, and she said the EPPE research in the UK said that the most effective preschools were ones that created a balance of that child-led and adult-led, so there's a lot of research out there, and we can continue learning and different philosophies and approaches and perspectives. And I think that there's great merit in looking at the different ways and trying things. Teresa did ask about what age is too young for fire play. With good education going along with it. I would say it's very incremental, and you may have more to say it, but and there are ways even for younger ones. There are safety parameters. I did a session yesterday on risky play, but there are safety parameters. Sometimes it may, like I've seen some people, just like introducing the space and how we use the space before any fire is even there. I can share a link, Teresa, to the podcast episode I did and some resources. There was a good, Natural Start Alliance had an online conference this summer, and they had a session just on fire. And I don't know that it's, I typically use it more with preschoolers and above, and I have like 6-year-olds and above making their own fire in little tin can things in a more controlled area, and kind of start with that. I always say you can't just watch a video or read about fires. You have to make fires to understand fires. And so, yeah. But David, do you have anything about fires?
No, that's your response is basically what I would have said.
Okay. Yeah. And it's developmental, it's incremental, and some of it's just playing with the charcoal that's left behind from the fire as mark making tool in the outdoors too. So I've seen children do that a lot. Of course, when it's all cool and all of those things too. So Claire Warden from Mind Stretchers, she's done a lot of work with that too. So.
Right. Her little book on fire is great.
Yes. And she's got little cards and stuff too. And she does like benefit risk assessment with it within there, and some things as well, which make it a little bit more accessible to using it. So, well, thank you, David, very much. We appreciate it. Looking forward to reviewing this again and all of that stuff. Thank you so much for your wisdom. This just makes me more excited for your book, and looking forward to getting my hands on this and seeing what can happen with it. I did want to just mention that our next session within the nature-based early childhood environmental education strand is going to be like a statewide kind of more action plan action focused. As part of the conference and some of the funding that we receive from this, we will have at least 3 different follow-up sessions if people choose to participate, where we're focusing on not just learning and taking this information, but applying it into our situations, our programs, and then being able to report back and share challenges, joys, ask questions, share resources, all of those kinds of things. So we want to be able to see us implementing this. And so this next statewide planning meeting will be a little bit more focused on the statewide, that action component and what we can do to take the next steps and then circle back with this. So if you want to join us for that, you're welcome to, but that information will go out to all participants in the conference as well. So thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, your expertise, David. It looks like a wonderful book, and it just inspires me so much to see children getting outside in urban areas and more rural areas and just nature in general. It's everywhere. So thank you so much. Thanks to all the participants too.
Bye.
Bye, David. Thanks.